Hi everyone. Feel free to start asking questions about EB-1A and NIW profile building. Yeah, just a couple of thoughts about a few things I've been coming across in regards to EB-1A. A lot of people are still focusing on trying to find. I think there's just fixation on finding the right opportunities instead of understanding how to find the right opportunities. As in, there seems to be this assumption that there is this set of opportunities out there that USCIS is automatically going to agree with as enough for EB-1A. That's not really how things work. What happens, what tends to matter more is being able to find these opportunities, and that just comes down to doing a lot of outreach. Not so much finding the right list of opportunities to then target. So how do you use outreach to find these opportunities? Well, a lot of these opportunities come from just going to, say, local chapter events of professional organizations of which you are a part and talking to a bunch of people there. You will come across people who will be conference organizers, editors of top journals and top journals, perhaps even members of top committees within the professional organization. Those are the kinds of people you will want to be interacting with because they tend to have access to a lot of opportunities where top professionals like you can go speak, can go share your expertise, can go participate, perhaps as a volunteer to start, and then eventually work your way up to speaker. This is how you land profile building opportunities. And I've seen this time and time again. The people who end up building the strongest EB-1A profiles, and this applies to EB-2 NIW as well, tend to be the people who aren't fixated on finding this magical list of opportunities to target, but are instead actually going to events, talking to other top professionals. That is what you want to be doing if you want to find high quality profile building opportunity. Yeah, feel free to start asking questions. Anyone? Anyone have questions? Anyone have questions? Another thing that has come up a lot has been continuity of activities. You just don't want to be cramming things. This goes for both NIW and EB-1A. If you want to build a more natural case narrative, don't focus on cramming activities into a short period of time. Instead, show that you are continually getting involved in high quality opportunities. That is what you want to be showing if you want to build a strong EB-1A or EB-2 NIW profile. Although with EB-2 NIW, it's also about your proposed endeavor. For EB-1A, you want to show that you are continuously getting these kinds of opportunities that can be an added bonus to your profile. instead of just cramming all these opportunities into 1 to 2 months, which opens you up to pushback of, if you're such a top expert, why are you only getting one? Why do you only have 1 to 2 months of external recognition? Anyone have questions? Also, when doing activities, you don't just want to show proof of expertise through these activities. You want to really think about the kind of recognition you can prove through your involvement in a particular activity. So, what do I mean by recognition? Well, in the most basic sense, you want to show that other top professionals in your field are looking to you because of your expertise. And that could apply in an authorship context. You getting published in a top journal or a top industry publication. That is evidence that other top professionals are looking to you for your scholarly expertise in your field. You will then want to unpack that and try to prove who exactly is recognizing you. Are they directors in your field or CEOs in your field? Who are these people? Because if you can't say who these people are, then how can you claim that you are getting recognized by a certain group of people whose recognition is proof that you are a top expert? Same goes for speaking at a conference. If you attended a conference and spoke, who was in the audience? Top professionals? Who exactly then? CEOs? Directors? Engineering managers? The more specific you are about who is involved in the activities that you have been attending, the more likely you are to be able to present compelling evidence that actually helps with not just meeting criteria, but helping with final merits as well. And that is what you want to be doing with EB-1A. You don't want to just focus on doing a bunch of random activities. Not saying every single activity you do has to be final merits worthy evidence. Sometimes that's not possible, and that's fine. You're just checking off an additional criterion. That's absolutely fine. What's usually the issue, though, is when all the evidence you've presented, maybe outside of your foundational criterion, all of it looks very generic or not really well explained. So you want to be mindful of these things when getting involved in activities, that you are mindful of who is involved in these activities. Whose work are you judging? What kinds of conferences are you speaking at, and who is attending those conferences? Who is reading the publications where you've been published? You want to be very mindful and aware of what these things are for your particular profile. That is how you build the strongest possible EB-1A profile. Anyone have questions? feel free to start asking your EB-1A or EB-2 NIW profile building questions. We can also talk a bit about NIW. NIW has a lot more variation when it comes to profile building, and you can use activities that may not necessarily count for EB-1A. For NIW, for example, volunteering can count towards NIW, mentoring, student events. Just keep in mind that NIW is more about your proposed endeavor. Essentially, what do you intend to do to contribute to an area of national interest? And this is outside of your work with your company. And how well you prove that narrative is going to determine the strength of your NIW. If what you are presenting makes absolutely no sense, then that's, yeah, you want to make sure that you're not just, I guess this approach doesn't really work as well for NIW. Can't really check off criteria with NIW. It's more about having a proposed endeavor that makes sense. How do you intend to contribute to an area of national interest outside of your work with your company? And then you have to do activities that are related to your proposed endeavor that show that you are positioning yourself as someone who can achieve this proposed endeavor, or maybe you're actually making progress towards the proposed endeavor already. And that is where doing activities like volunteering, like mentoring, these kinds of activities can be relevant to your EB-2 NIW proposed endeavor, assuming that they're relevant. But I think this goes for EB-1A as well. You want to make sure that the activities you're doing aren't just there to kind of like check a box. That's what's been getting the most pushback. It's activities that look like you're just kind of checking a box and may have nothing to do with your field of expertise, or may have nothing to do with your proposed endeavor, that don't really carry the markers of recognition that you want to be presenting for a strong EB-1A, or may not be exactly related to your proposed endeavor, may not be proof of expertise or proof that you are well positioned to pursue your proposed endeavor. There's just a lot of these things that you have to be mindful of when profile building that may not necessarily be obvious, as just saying. For example, when you are speaking at a conference, you have to be mindful of who is. You may want to be mindful of who exactly is in the audience for that conference, because that's relevant to how you prove a claim. Because if you're claiming that you've gotten recognition from top professionals, you will want to show proof that top professionals were present at whatever activity that you're involved with. For example, speaking at a conference, you will want to find some sort of objective documentation that talks about who was in the audience, and that could be from the organizer of the conference. It's just taking this like common sense layperson approach to profile building. Just keep in mind that the officer reviewing your profile is going to be a layperson as well, and if what you've done doesn't really make sense to someone who's never worked in your field, if they can't follow that thread of being able to follow how you've risen to the top of your field for EB-1A, or how you intend to contribute to an area of national interest outside of your work with your company, because it's not immediately obvious that you were, say, an expert in regards to this proposed endeavor, or that you've really done much in regards to this proposed endeavor, or this proposed endeavor is something that actually makes sense for your field. If none of that is obvious, then you're just going to get questioned. And that's just something you want to be mindful of. Have this common sense layperson approach to profile building. Think about how someone who has never worked in your field would think about what you're doing right now. Would it be something that would be understandable to a layperson? Something that you've done. For example, if you have a proposed endeavor and you've done volunteering around raising awareness around this proposed endeavor, perhaps by helping with events around this kind of proposed endeavor and the problem that it is related to, that would make more sense than, say, doing some sort of activity that is in the field of the proposed endeavor but has nothing to do with the proposed endeavor. How you construct that narrative is going to play a big role in how sensible your case looks. And that's really been something that a lot of lawyers seem to have been stressing, at least based on the lawyers I've been speaking to. There seems to be a lot of pushback on activities that don't really make sense, in the sense that it looks like started to do certain activities because they were kind of told generically you should be doing these kinds of activities, you should be judging these hackathons, or you should be speaking at these conferences, but there's no attentiveness to whether these activities actually help with that person's case narrative. For example, was for example, say you are, I don't know, like a top AI expert and you're really good at, for example, you're, I don't know, like one of the foremost experts in like AI generation tools or something like that, and you're one of the people who actually worked on these tools. Going and then judging some sort of random hackathon for students, would that really make sense in proving that you have risen to the top of your field? Probably not so much as judging a really top hackathon, a really prestigious hackathon that is focused on the top engineers in AI. So it's really these details. That's what matters when it comes to profile building. It's all about these details that you're not really aware of until you start profile building, and then that's when you start to see opportunities that you might even get recruited for if you are someone who is a top expert who is constantly talking to other top experts in your field. If you develop that habit and you just keep doing this kind of outreach, except it's more like in real life outreach where you go to events. You might even go to other hackathons and demo days and show up there and talk to people there. And you might end up getting to know people who are organizing these kinds of events. Anyone have questions? Anyone have questions? All right, no one has questions. Thanks everyone for unless anyone has questions. I can just stay around for 5 to 10 minutes. Just feel free to ask your questions in the chat. How to get advisor positions. You can talk to former professors to ask them about industry advisory boards at your alma mater. You can talk to companies that are looking for industry professionals to advise them. It all just comes down to having a lot of conversations with primarily professors, other companies, professional organizations as well, because sometimes they do look for advisors to advise on matters to do with their organization. They have committees as well that are looking for advisors. So primarily target universities, smaller companies in your field, or it could be even larger companies, depends on your field, and professional organizations, professional associations. All right, if no one else has any questions, thanks everyone for joining today's live stream.